Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 960B, and today's date is May 2nd, 2016, and the title of the episode is U.S. has lost control of the Middle East, and the fate of the petrodollar is in jeopardy. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, we've talked about the TPP, the TTIP, and how it really is not a benefit to any of the people or the governments around the world. And we see there's about 248 pages that were leaked of the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, the TTIP. And there are certain things in there that are very disturbing. And we knew that if you need to keep this a secret, this is definitely not a benefit to the people. Actually, it goes everything against freedom, democracy, transparency, and we see right now, out of some of these leaked pages, we see that there's going to be no ability for EU nations to withdraw from the market if it has to do with hazardous products. Because basically in the TTIP, all products would assume to be safe unless proven not to be. And of course, how do you prove that they aren't safe? Well, it's not going to be done through the governments. It's going to be done through the corporation and their own court system. And you know how that's going to turn out. And what's very interesting is that the EU, they have a 70-year-old rule which allows nations to restrict trade in order to protect human, animal, and plant life or health. And we know that the U.S. pushes out GMO products. A lot of countries reject GMOs because they feel they're unsafe. And by having this TTIP, guess what will happen? They'll have to accept GMO foods. And we see at this point that when we look at this, the TPP, the TTIP, and corporations spying on the people with the help of all the different agencies, it's fascism. Plain and simple. And they're taking this to the next level. The FBI, they're setting up something new called Shared Responsibility Committees, and this is being done in New Jersey. This is to stop homegrown terrorism, to stop extremists, to stop those anti-government individuals. So what they're doing is they're partnering up with different communities, and the FBI is going to use identification and mental health counseling as tools to those who might head down a path of extremism. The committees would include community leaders, clergy, members, mental health professionals, whose goals would be to identify those who might support these types of activities. So now they're getting people involved to point the finger at, this person might be a problem. No evidence, nothing like that whatsoever, but they'll be looking at those people and looking at them very closely. Now we see that the spying, they're pushing this even further. There are billboards now that will spy on individuals. And they're going to be using biometrics and mobile phone location data to identify shopping habits. And they're going to collect this data. So when you pass a billboard, they're going to try to collect this information. Now, the new type of billboard is going to use facial recognition surveillance combined with mobile phone tracking to study travel and shopping patterns. The product is called Radar, and it's the brainchild of Clear Channel Communications, working together with other tech companies, including AT&T and others. And they've already rolled out some of this in 10 major markets. And if it all goes according to plan, it's going to blanket the country by the end of this year. And this is why everyone, I have to say, needs to protect themselves. I mean, first step, shut your GPS off. Yes, a lot of people say, well, even if you shut it off, it doesn't work. But you know what? Shut it off. And you need a way to block your signal in your phone. Well, there's an easy product called Block-A-Pocket. You can get it at blockapocket.com. It's a sleeve. You can slip your phone right into it. And guess what? They can't track you. They can't pick up your signal if it's in there. Same thing with your credit cards. With the RFID chip in there where they scan it and they get that information, it can't go through there because it's intertwined with different metals that blocks the signal completely. But we're seeing at this point that they're pushing this very hard to continually spy on the people, collect your information, and then where does this information go? Well, under the Freedom Act, they can have it transferred over to the government, which is then put into their database system. So now they have your face, they know your movements, they know your shopping habits, they know your accounts, they know almost everything about you. And you can see they can correlate all this information. So it's our responsibility to use encryption. It's our responsibility to protect your information, just like you protect your documents. You put it into a safe, you lock it up. You have it in a secret area in your home. You don't let the government come in and say, oh, here's the key, let me give you a copy. Here's a copy of my combination. Anytime you want to look, you go right ahead. You don't need a warrant. You don't do that. Well, it's the same thing with this. There is no reason for the corporations, the government, to continually track us like this. And each person needs to say, you know something? I don't want this. I want my privacy. Because if you give up your privacy, they'll just keep on doing it. And it'll get worse and worse. They'll know everything about you. And they'll use this information later on. They always do. And it won't be in a good way. Now, out in Brazil, we see there are hundreds of thousands of people. And now they are marching in the streets of Brazil. And we see that they are supporting Rousseff. And they're trying to fight back, saying, no, this is our leader. You're not pushing out Dilma Rousseff. And we see protests were seen in 16 of the 17 states. And it was called by the Central Union of Workers and numerous other labor and left-wing organizations. And they were all protesting, countering the impeachment of Rousseff. So we see there is a battle going on in Brazil. And we'll have to watch that very carefully to see how that turns out. Now, out in Kiev, we see the Lugansk people. They are saying, listen, we're ready for elections. We're following the Minsk agreement. We want Kiev to observe the elections. And at this point, Kiev has not responded to this because they don't want elections occurring. They don't want the constitution changes going forward. They don't want to go forward with completing the Minsk II ceasefire agreement because they're holding back. They don't want to complete it because they have something completely different planned for the southeastern and Crimea. Because we have to understand, the U.S. government central bankers, they're trying to push more sanctions on Russia for taking Crimea away. And sanctions will be removed when Crimea is returned. So we can see at this point, they are putting pressure on Russia. They're putting pressure on the southeastern people. And they're not going to stop until they get these areas back. Now, the propaganda is being pushed out very hard now in regards to North Korea because we understand the U.S. government central bankers, they are pushing the idea that North Korea is going to be doing something. Now, North Korea wanted talks with the United States about the number of forces that are in South Korea, the drills that are going on, and the U.S. doesn't want to even have talks with North Korea. And they're saying, listen, we'll stop all this. Let's all sit down and talk about it. But we know that the U.S., they just want to provoke North Korea because they realize that North Korea, maybe they can provoke them into doing something to start this war. Now, South Korea is out there. They're saying that there's a possibility that North might, again, try to launch a mid or long-range missile, which would be able to carry nuclear weapons, and we can see the propaganda for this is continuing on. We see out in the EU, a lot of the countries have implemented border controls, and they were temporary, and they were only supposed to last about 6 months or so, but it looks like countries now are saying, listen, we need to extend this at least 2 years. Germany, Denmark, Austria, France, Belgium. They're saying we need to extend this. The situation is not getting better. It is getting worse at this point. And we haven't seen anything like this since World War II. And what is happening right now is that from all the fighting in the Middle East, where the U.S. is in there trying to maintain control of the Middle East, we see they are losing control. And there's just war. The economies are poor. People are suffering. And they're leaving their countries. Now, a big part of it is Turkey, where they've been keeping all of these refugees. And who knows, they whispered into their ear and said, listen, you can have a better life in Europe. And they just let them out, and they let them flow through Europe. And this was done on purpose to get the EU nations involved in Syria, because they want all hands on deck. They want military troops, they want military assets, and they want them all there ready to go to get Assad out. And the only way to stop the refugee problem is to do this. Now, I don't think they expected all the countries to say, okay, now we're setting up borders here, and we're not letting these refugees in. We're going to implement border control, because as we know, these were all open borders with Schengen. And we can see at this point that this kind of backfired at this time. But Turkey came out and they were blackmailing the EU nations. They blackmailed them with money. They wanted visa-free travel. And we see that they still haven't, all the requirements that Turkey had to meet, they haven't met them yet. And they're supposed to be done by June. And we're going to have to watch this very carefully, because we're in May right now and we're heading into June. And we know come July, August, around this time frame, we believe at this point in time, all the indicators are pointing to something huge is about to happen. And we can see from all the military assets that have been building up in this area, from all the plans, the missiles that have been delivered to the border of Turkey, Germany building a base in Syria, and the U.S. going around to all the different nations building up the coalition forces, something is about to happen. Now, out in the Pacific, we see China. They are denying entry to the USS John C. Stennis and its escort ships into the port of Hong Kong. And U.S. warships frequently visit Hong Kong. And from time to time, they have not let them in. And it looks like at this point, they're saying you cannot have access. Now, they did this, back in 2007 when China denied access to the aircraft carrier USS Kitty Hawk. And we see right now, because the U.S. is in the Pacific, they're sailing around the South China Sea, trying to provoke China, and China is saying, okay, you want to play the game, you can't come into the port right now. Now, of course, the U.S. most likely is going to make a really big deal about this and, make it seem like, oh, this is just unbelievable. But this has been done time and time again, where the U.S. does something, China says, okay, then we don't want your ships in this area. Now, out in Estonia, we see NATO. They're going to be sending about 1,500 troops to participate in the largest Estonia's military drill. And this the drill is called Spring Storm. And in total, there's going to be about 6,000 servicemen, which will be practicing their battle skills right on the border of Russia from May 2nd to May 20th. This is going to include 10 NATO countries. And their main goal of the military exercise is to assess the skills of the infantry battalions, rehearse coordination between different units, and get prepared for war with Russia, of course. And this is exactly what we've been seeing. This is all a dress rehearsal for what is to come. Now, NATO is out there, and specifically Stoltenberg. He is saying, listen, NATO is ready to extend its role in Libya, the Mediterranean, in conjunction with the European Union. If the unity government asks for NATO to come in, they will bring in their forces and help out in any way possible. Now, we see that the Libyan government parliament, they have entered into a standoff at this point, and we see the unity government has so far failed to translate the political support and endorsement of the Western and regional powers into action. France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Spain, and Italy, they have given their support to the unity government because they created the puppet government. And what we're seeing right now is that the country is not going along with it. The parliament is not going along with it. And right now, it looks like they're at a standoff. So to push this along, what they have done is they had the Islamic State, and we don't even know if it was the Islamic State, ambush British, Italian troops in Libya, saying that the Islamic State is really getting out of hand. They're pushing into areas. They have attacked different troops inside of Libya, and they might be making a call for the forces to come in and to control the situation. And this is something that we're going to have to watch very, very carefully. Now, out in Iraq, we see that the protesters, they've been protesting against a body, and they want a change of government. They did this very peacefully. And we see already that the leader of Iraq, which is most likely taking orders from the U.S. government, he is calling for arrests of those protesters. Now, they haven't gone forward and done this yet, but we see his credibility. It is crumbling right now. And every single time that people speak out, the people of the country say, we don't want this. We see leaders who are puppet governments, who are part of the entire central bank system. They always seem to use force and crack down on these people. Look at Turkey with Erdogan. Look what happened in Yemen. Here we are in Iraq, where the same thing is about to happen, because the people, they want their country back. And it's happening throughout the Middle East. The U.S. is losing control of the Middle East at this point. The petrodollar is in jeopardy. And this means that things are going to rapidly fall apart very, very quickly as this progresses. Now, the U.S., they can't let this happen. And this is why they're bringing in forces to maintain control, because they realize if the people take back their country, they kick out the puppet governments in all these Middle Eastern countries, the petrodollar will cease to exist. They will use other currencies. If the petrodollar ceases to exist, guess what happens? The economy folds. The U.S. implodes. That's what happens. So the U.S. is doing whatever they possibly can to keep control of the situation. Now, of course, this is not going to benefit the people of the United States or the rest of the people of the world. It only benefits themselves, makes them very wealthy, makes the central bank very wealthy. And they like this system. So they're going to do whatever it takes. Now, out in Syria, we understand the U.S. is making a really big deal that Assad hit a hospital. And of course, as we've seen, that this whole thing is complete propaganda. The U.S. was flying A-10 jet fighters over this area. We know the Islamic State, the Free Syrian Army, they were shelling the area in Aleppo. And there is a Dr. Nabil Antaki who says he was in Aleppo and he decided not to leave this area. And he reported that all of this is propaganda when we're talking about the events in Aleppo. He's saying that the mainstream media, they're lying by omission. He's saying that it is the Islamic State, it's Al-Qaeda, it's the Free Syrian Army that have been attacking the hospitals. And he says all of us here in Aleppo are disgusted by the lack of impartiality and objectivity. They only ever talk about the loss of life in the East Aleppo, which is entirely controlled by al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, the moderate rebels. And he says the media never mentions the terrorist blockade upon our people, or the electricity cuts and water shortages inflicted upon us by the moderate rebels, by the terrorists. And he says it wasn't the Syrian forces, it wasn't Assad. They're there protecting them. It was the other side once again. So here we have it once again. The U.S. is using propaganda, which we knew from the beginning. Even Russia came out and said, listen, we have the information. We know what's going on here. And the U.S. is once again caught because we know how the U.S. government central bankers work. They use the terrorists, they use these forces to wreak havoc on the people. And if it's not going their way, they use chemical weapons, they torture people, and then they blame it on Assad. That's the MO. This is what they continually use non-stop. Now, the Islamic State is losing their territory. They've lost another 30% in Iraq and Syria. It's getting worse for the U.S. government central bankers, Turkey, the coalition forces. And this is why they've been building up military assets, troops in this area because they're preparing for something different. Because they realize this type of approach is a dead end. And we see already they're moving to another plan. And the plan looks like they're going to try some type of ground invasion. And this is something that we need to watch and look at very carefully. Now, the Islamic State is out there, and they're claiming that they have a mole working inside the heart of British military. Now, of course, this comes after they released a hit list of drone pilots to be murdered. This also comes after they said they had the information on U.S. military personnel. A lot of this is surface information. You can get it right on the net. And we can see all this is propaganda, because what they've been doing is they've been building up the propaganda, because they want you to believe that the next event that's going to happen is going to be by the Islamic State. And this will most likely be the physical attacks. Now, while the physical attacks are occurring, what's going to happen is countries like Russia, China, North Korea, Syria, Iran, they will be blamed for most likely the cyber type of attacks to bring everything into one event. Say, this is why we need to shut down the financial system because Russia attacked it. This is why the electric went out in certain areas because of North Korea. And they're going to try to meld everything all into one to explain why we need to go to war and why the entire system is crashing. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.